Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the newest edition of The Six. And yes, I know we are five today. Liz Antaya is on vacation at the beach, where I suspect we all wish we were with her. So it is my pleasure to have Robin Flaherty with us, Christine Shear, Nancy Giacalone, and Pat Isaac. And we all, except for Pat, just came back from Benefits Pro, and we are going to talk about our key takeaways. I don't think really any of them have anything to do with insurance. And I think you might be in for quite the conversation today. So, Christine, kick us off.
Sure. Happy to kick us off. Thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. Benefits Pro, it was my first time there. I've never attended the Benefits Pro Broker Expo before, so I was very glad to make it this year. And it's definitely an event that I will attend again in the future. And one of the things that we were just talking about before we joined today was how we have the opportunity, as I'm sure all of you do within your industries, to go to a lot of conferences. And we have to be selective about which ones we attend because there's only so much time in a year. But this one was interesting to me because it was more than just about benefits. Yes, we're all benefit advisors in one way, shape, or form, brokers, consultants, agents, whatever you want to call us. But it was a lot about how to run a business and how to, within the industry that is changing so quickly at such a rapid pace, both from a clinical to an advisory to an employer to a vendor partner perspective, how do we keep up with that? Whether you're a big organization or a small one, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of change occurring in the industry right now. So how do you keep up with it and cull out what's going to work well for you? And as advisors, what's going to work well for our clients, both in the short term and then the longer term. So I found it fascinating from that perspective. Our guest today is Nancy Giacalone. Nancy actually was last year's Broker of the Year at the Benefits Pro Broker Expo. So we're super excited to have her joining us today to talk about her experience in the industry and attending this event, and really help us springboard the conversation to the work that we do as business entrepreneurs trying to promote healthcare and good benefits programming for all employers across the United States. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question. As I mentioned, Nancy was our Broker of the Year last year, so well deserved. Now, Nancy, you've been engaged with Benefits Pro and attending the expo for a while, and you won the award last year. Somebody that I know you're close to in the industry and really look up to, was the first woman to win the award several years ago. I'd be curious on your take about the organization and the annual expo and their respective genesis.
Sure. Be happy to answer that. Thanks, Christine. So, yes, I've been going to Benefits Pro for, I don't know, probably close to 10 years now. And it was, I was invited and asked to do something. And so I went, and I enjoy it because it's very different from the other conferences I attend. And one of the things I try to do with the limited amount of time that I have available to do these sorts of things is to choose events that are different from each other, because I like to have a very broad perspective of what's happening in the industry and not just confirmation from the people that are doing the same exact things that I'm doing of how great we all are. I like to be able to see it from different angles. And also, I like to embrace people that are different points in their journey. And a lot of people that tend to come to Benefits Pro for the first time are newer in the industry, and it's maybe a less intimidating entry point for them. So that's one of the things I like about that organization. I have definitely seen an evolution. Susan Combs was the first female Broker of the Year, and that was back in either 2016 or 17. I don't recall the year off the top of my head. But after that, not another one. 20 years they've been giving this award. And until I won it last year, shockingly, because I don't do the biggest, fanciest, splashiest things in the industry, but I've been very committed to my clients, the industry, and lifting up other brokers. But this year, I was really excited to see Chelsea Rikus win. She is a young female, and for women to win back-to-back years, And there were 4 out of 5 people that were finalists were women. 4 out of 5 were women, and they're all doing amazing things in the industry. And to see somebody like Chelsea, who is in her early 30s, with the level of accomplishment that she has already in her career, is inspiring to me, regardless of her gender or her age. So it was exciting to see her recognized for her work and not just as a token female.
Yeah, I thought it was fabulous. I was so happy to see the panel that was being considered for that award, and then to see her win as well. Those of us that were there,
there was a lot of diversity on that. Of the 4 women that were finalists, each one operated in a different way. And for me, that was the key takeaway. There were not 4 cookie cutter people on that panel. There were women that had very diverse careers. And I think that was really very important and it was put on display to very good effect. And I think that was really important. Every woman approached her business differently.
Very true.
Yeah, and Allison, even though I wasn't part of it, I have a pretty good understanding as to what happens with the conference. But I think something that you just hit on, which is really really important, it's really about diversity. Especially in our industry, we know that it has been a very male, oriented industry for many many years. And finally, I think the light bulb went on and just basically said, hey, you know what? We approach things much differently. And you need diversity to have a lot of success because we're all looking at it from different lenses. And I think also, the importance of experience. And, as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like our experience comes from our case studies, and that's how we've become experts in our field. But also you can't just look at experience. You have to look at the ability to be able to really think in a very diversified manner to say,
Mhm.
hey, we can't continue to do things in the way that it was done, because guess what, everything's changing. And yes, COVID speed has speeded everything up, and it's gone in a completely faster direction. But at the end of the day, people don't want the same thing. And so for those of us in the industry, that's what make us really good at what we do. Is we're not just going to sit there and warm a seat. We're always helping one another think differently. Think like our clients. What would our clients want? And it's all about the outcome. So I'm sorry, I had to add to that because I just feel like that is such a huge element of what we do every day. So I'll pass the baton on comments.
Let's keep going with that. I think that's an interesting thread. So, one of the things you just said, Pat, was how we keep each other, we sort of keep each other current. Not just those of us on the session today, but all of us, everybody that was at, the Broker Expo, everybody that we work with on a daily basis is a part of keeping our thoughts broader and better, because we're not the only ones that are changing and growing over time. Our clients are doing the same thing at a very fast pace as well. And so what worked for them 5 years ago is probably not the same thing that's going to work for them today. In very limited instances is that the case. But I like the perspective of, Nancy said this when she was talking earlier. She intentionally goes to different events to make sure that her vantage point and her thoughts are current and different. So we're having that diversity of thought and that diversity of experience that we're bringing into our clients and the work that we do. Robin, I'm going to ping up to you because we were having an interesting conversation on the way to the airport yesterday, or before we left for the airport. And one of the things that we were talking about a lot was the back end financials. So when you're in the benefits industry, when you're talking about insurance and premiums and how they work for a client and how a benefit plan works for a client, many times the approach is a very siloed approach. It's I'm coming in with premiums, or I'm coming in with a self-funded solution, and this is how much it's going to cost you, and this is what the benefits look like. So this is what it'll cost you, the employer. This is what it'll cost the employees, both from a fixed premium perspective and an out-of-pocket exposure perspective. But one of the things that's often missing, and we had some really interesting side conversations about this during the event, was the end-to-end conversation. And I keep coming back to, we are business consultants who do employee benefits. I've said that many times. We're business consultants who do employee benefits, or we're employee benefits experts who do business with companies. And the traditional historical broker role or agent role, was one that was relatively siloed. And it can't be anymore. Mm-hmm. Organizations have a very, very focused approach on their financials today, whether they're privately held, publicly traded, or public sector. And being able to talk the business of benefits is super important. So I'm going to ping it over to Robin and ask her to talk a little bit about some of that.
Well, and you're right. Exactly. It is an important conversation, but it does depend on who you're having it with, right? It depends on who's really interested in that larger conversation of the strategies that we put in place and the cost of the benefits. How is it ultimately impacting those financials of your business? So most likely it's going to be the CFO or the CEO who's most interested in that conversation. I'm sure that HR is also interested, but it just depends on who's involved in the final decisions at the company, right? And what's interesting is there was a comment made in one of the sessions about you can't take the benefit out of employee benefits. And, so it just depends on, I don't think I'm ready to, I know that, we said something in our session yesterday that we would talk more on our podcast. But I can tell everyone that we are all working on, how does that larger conversation look? There's a lot of talk about EBITDA. I think EBITDA is a piece of it. I don't think it's all of it. It just depends on where the company is in their growth stage as to whether or not EBITDA is really the be all of and end all of the, the metric that's used for if we are able to implement certain different strategies that are, that end up being great cost containment mechanisms, right? I think there's a conversation about other metrics that also should be looked at and why, but I don't think I'm ready to reveal that yet.
Well, and you're a CPA by background, so you're somebody who's intimately familiar with financial statements, balance sheets.
Too much more than I'd like to be. Yes.
Yes. All of those things, and the work that we do feeds into that. The cost, feeds into that, but rarely is the conversation at the table about how that feeds into that downstream. And that's an area that I definitely see some of our work emerging into over time. It's too important not to.
It is. And, but if you think about it, if you're talking to the CFO, they know exactly where you're going, right? So it's really more of, as benefit advisors, arming ourselves with a command of that conversation. And, kind of the if then, and, if you do, if you move this lever, here's the results, and being able to jump into those conversations wholly and really stay on track with the conversation, because the CFO will have no problem staying on track, but it's important that you know how to navigate through that conversation and lead it, really.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that. I think this is, again, for the many years that all of us have practiced in the industry, really what it comes down to is the fact of what are the outcomes, right? What does an employer really want? What I mean, everyone wants the same thing. They want lower rates, they want sustainability in that area, and that's what they're looking for us to do for them. Because yes, I mean, it is the second to third largest item on their P&L, to pay for insurance, but it's even a larger loss when an employee can't work, they're unproductive, or a family member gets sick. I mean, all of us have families and or know friends, where there have been a sick one and people can't work, or they're not fully there. So all of those elements actually go into the cost of care, element for an employer. And so the thing that I have to tell you that bothers me most, and I'm very transparent, you guys know, is when I hear others out there in our field that are going out there saying, oh, we're going to do a risk assessment. What the hell is a risk assessment? All right. It's BS. We all know that. Because at the end of the day, all right, unless you know true claims and what's going on and what's driving, you're not going to be able to do a risk assessment. But clients fall for that
Yeah.
stuff. And that's the part that we have to think differently. And I'm saying this to all corporate clients out there. We can't continue to have the wool, thrown over our eyes and say, I'm going to trust because that's my buddy I play golf with. You know what? What has that golf game, done for you and your bottom line?
It's an expensive golf game.
So sorry, I'm unamending, and it's
Yeah.
like we can't continue to create the same conversations. They have to change. And if they're not working, I mean, everyone is ignoring the appropriation, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. Guess what? This is real.
Not all employers are ignoring that, and they are starting to ask questions, particularly related to compensation. And I think that's wonderful. But they're not quite, a lot of them, the CAA is a lot, right? So a lot of them don't know all the questions to ask, but they are starting to ask the questions. So you better be comfortable with your fee and be able to explain what it is you do for it.
And you better be honest about it, because I have seen compensation disclosures that are just a joke.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I saw one this morning, Nancy, and I was like, are you kidding me? And the client thought, no, these are the most honest people. Like, no, they're not. Let me take a look with you. Mm-hmm. And I pulled it up on a big screen and showed them. And they were like, you could tell, I almost peeled them off the floor. People don't know. And that was part of my conversation. People have to think differently. They're going to need to look for different dialogue, because guess what? You're not going to get the best results. So, sorry, now I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, but no, you raise a good point about that risk analysis. I mean, at a minimum, to your point, and unless you have all of the pieces of information you need for that risk analysis. So that's really the question is, is there full disclosure when those pieces aren't available, right? That's really the conversation is, to do a true risk analysis, right? We're missing this, and this.
It's just nothing more than a benchmark. Anybody can do a benchmark. My kid can do a benchmark.
And let's not forget that a risk analysis is based at a particular point in time, based on the information that you have at that point in time. It doesn't take into consideration the unknowns that are going to happen down the road. So just because you've done a risk analysis does not mean that it's necessarily going to be reflective of actual performance.
It's like when you're actually putting a budget together, projected versus actual.
Exactly.
It's the same thing. So, and that's what I always, mention to clients is you have to look at this. This has to be part. I mean, Robin, you'll appreciate this. You're putting a budget together, okay, and projections for the following year. Why aren't you taking that same amount of time and interest in, finding what are the second to third drivers, of your P&L, and how can we work, best to go ahead and change that trajectory for our company.
Right. Keep in mind, accounting is not finance, and we're in the financing of healthcare.
Yep.
But I think that people think, I was talking to a retired executive who I serve on a board with, and we were talking about how he looked at the health insurance renewal. He said, we never looked at this. We looked at the renewal. We said, here's your budget. You deal with this. We're done. And that conversation has to change.
You deal with this. Who's the you in that, Nan or Allison?
HR.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant.
You deal with the HR deals with the administrative function of it. They get their budget from the executive team, and that was the end of it. And we know that that's not the end of it now. We know what wonderful things can happen when all of those people are talking together.
Absolutely. It's the collaboration, and it comes back to the business of benefits. You know, it's so critically important.
Spoiler alert. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's, do you have HR in the meeting with your CPA, with your finance team? Do you know what I mean? And are they really making, unless they're at the CHRO level, normally most companies don't have those individuals, those professionals, if I may, within that conversation, that meeting. And it's just, again, everything is siloed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the biggest problem everywhere we turn. And no one wants to connect the dots. And that's what we're all really good at. I mean, everyone on this screen and Liz, that's what we focus on, connecting the dots so that we're going to get better outcomes for the client. Many of us even put compensation. We put compensation on that. Like, hey, I'm talk to walk, talk to talk, walk to walk. I'm in this with you, not alone. So
I want to take that and springboard to the kickoff keynote at the Broker Expo. So there were some really wonderful keynotes, I thought, at this event. And the first one was Ken Jennings, the current host of Jeopardy. And, my mom was so excited when I sent her the pictures of Ken Jennings and me that I took afterwards, because she loves Jeopardy and loves Ken Jennings. And so that was very cute. And he was such he just struck me as just like a normal guy. The way that he spoke, He was very humble and generous in his commentary to the show and the contestants, and especially to Alex Trebek. But he walked us through what I termed lessons of change from his experience with the show, starting with when he grew up and what his background was that led him to actually be good at the show, and then his preparations for the show, and then how he ultimately became the MC for it, running the show that he does today. So I want to ping it back to Nancy for a second and ask her for her take on that session.
Thanks, Christine. Actually, I loved that session. I loved all the keynotes, but the thing I loved most about that session is one of the things that I've always said is that I'm a curious person. I'm curious by nature. I want to, if somebody tells me, oh, I'm doing this or I'm using this product, I want to know more. I'm interested and I want to find out about it. And that was what he said was his key to success, was his curiosity. If he heard about something he didn't know about, he would immediately go down a rabbit hole and learn more about it. And he said that was also the common thread among all of the winningness contestants, is that they had a very deep curiosity. And I think that really serves us well in the benefit industry. So I liked that. I liked that message.
Yeah. Helps us see the dots to connect them.
Yep.
And underneath the threads.
Yep.
I took some notes on my phone during that session. So I wrote Ken Jennings, Lessons of Change. Preparation is key, which all of you embody so well. The second one was really interesting to me too. And this is a danger in our industry for anyone at any level of experience in the industry. Never assume that a paradigm is going to evolve as expected, a paradigm change. So, those of us that have been in the industry for a while and been professionally working for some time, I think we inherently know that because of our curiosity. We ask a lot of questions so that we never get to a point of full assumption. We know the danger in assumption. Then he also said, and this is me paraphrasing, but adapt or die. And that's what we're living right now in this industry is, a huge era of adaptation.
Oh, yeah.
talk about pivoting thoughts and how people should perhaps express themselves or not? Because I think we had a wonderful lesson in that this week.
You pinging that one back to me?
Yes. So I am going to toss this back, but we had an event that we've had for several years, and we had some Wonder Woman costumes, and we had some commentary around those Wonder Woman costumes.
Yes. So Nancy was one of a couple of people who showed up in a Wonder Woman costume and rocked it, I must say. And I'll let you tell the story, but I just want to tee it up. She received a comment about it that led to an interesting reflection and a LinkedIn post today. So go ahead, Nancy.
So, first of all, let me state, I was covered from neck to toe. So there was nothing inappropriate about my Wonder Woman costume. I'm 62 years old. I'm completely proud of that. I'm comfortable with it. I have no issues with that. And I was running back to my room to change out of the costume after this really great session. And an older gentleman grabbed my arm and he says, "Oh, are you the geriatric Wonder Woman?" And I was so surprised that he would say those words out loud. I just said, "Yes, I am," and kept on my way, changed my clothes. And I wasn't upset by the comment at all, as much as I was shocked by it. I was shocked that someone would not have enough self-awareness to realize that maybe those words did not need to leave his mouth, or that he could have said it to his buddy after the fact, whatever the case may be. But to say that in a public environment, I just found distasteful. Again, not hurtful, just distasteful that someone would say that. But it had been kind of playing in my mind. And last night, my husband and I were watching actually a really great documentary on Hulu about the rock band Bon Jovi. And one of the comments that John Bon Jovi made was, "If I can't continue to be a badass at what I'm doing, I don't want to do it anymore." And that's the way I look at it, is that I am going to give it my all for as long as I choose to do so. And if I want to put on a freaking Wonder Woman costume and stand in the front of a room full of people, I am going to do that, and I am going to do it proudly. But it does bring up the point that our industry has historically been pale, male, and stale. There's no way around that one. And there's still a lot of mental entitlement to that attitude. So that's what I wanted to bring up, is that that part's not okay.
Especially in a world where, DEI is huge. There's a lot more focus on diversity in general. I always think like, EQ, right? Emotional intelligence. And that is like, I can tell you, even our employees, that's the first thing that I look for before we hire, is what the EQ level is here, because that's really important. We have to deal with all types of situations, including, such narrow-minded individuals like the one that approached you, Nancy. That's uncalled for. And, at the end of the day, where does that comment, what does it get that person to, right? Is it a feel good for them? But in my mind, one thing that I go to is, again, everyone in our industry talks a really good game. Okay. I'm going to link this because that's what I tend to do. Everyone talks a good game, but at the end of the day, what are you really reaching out for? Okay. Because I can tell you, your pockets are getting deeper, my friends. Okay. And some of us are working really hard, and we know that it's all about what the end result is at the end of the day for that client, because we're all concerned about our community. We're concerned about the economic state that our clients are in and the environment. And we are working towards changing that trajectory to get to the right place so that we all win in this. And so that's, I kind of took it out of content a little bit, but still connecting it to say, hey, yeah, you can vomit from, words and stuff, but the results is really what matters. And when you get to those results, I'm going to talk to you then, you know.
Right. And
This,
that is one of the things that I like about Benefits Pro is that um, Paul Wilson, who always hosts the conference, is always looking to push the edge a little bit. He's looking for new solutions. He's looking to hear from different people in the industry. You don't hear the same thing from the same people all the time. And yes, there are people there that we all know, but there is always something new. And I was talking to one of the vendors the other day who has been at that show for many years, and he said that the vendor hall is almost completely different than at any other show. And one of the things that we both noticed was there were no large insurance companies at this show. There were independent TPAs, stop loss vendors, the pet people, the legal people. You would expect to see that. There were a lot of wellness programs, a lot of new kinds of solutions. Somebody got really smart and brought in a barista and a very large espresso machine. And there was more diversity of thought in the room, which is, I think, why people go. There is now diversity of thought. And Paul is a big reader, so we also had a great author.
Yes.
Yes.
I would like to piggyback on what Allison said, because again, I have been there for a number of years, and I can attest to the fact that the content is always fresh. It is, he does always look to expand accessibility and to include people that are newer to the industry. And in her comment about the exhibit hall is also spot on. It's one of the few events I actually walk through the exhibitor hall because I like to see what's new and different, because otherwise I just see the same things at other places that I go to. And the other piece about this conference, I think that's a little bit different, and Christine touched on it at the very top, but it is very all encompassing. We do talk about how to craft insurance solutions and healthcare solutions, but we talk about mental health. We talk about the deep impact it can have on a workforce. We talk about generational perspectives. How do an older generation view things differently than a younger generation? And how do we address those communication challenges? We talk about how to develop a culture within an agency. So it's not just, here's what I did, look at how great I am, come be sure and pat me on the back when this session is over, and then I'm going to barf all over LinkedIn about it. It really is a very, sorry.
Always me. Thank you.
It really is a very comprehensive and different approach than you will see anywhere else. So I will just say, before I give up my soapbox, if you are an advisor watching this and you have never been, I highly recommend that this is one you put on your calendar.
Yeah, I'll definitely be back, because the spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation, true innovation, grassroots, bottom-up innovation, people, like I spent some time talking to a couple of diabetes organizations, who are bringing fresh new approaches from a clinical perspective, endocrinologists who have, seen from their own practices over time where the insurance industry is failing their patients and saying, I can fix this. I know how to put these two sides together so that we can keep people, connected to what they need to do to stay on top of their therapies, their medications, their visits, all of those things, potentially solve it. Another one that was super interesting to me that is bringing therapies into the mental health arena, like, ketamine and probably at some point psilocybins and stuff that are becoming more mainstream, that have absolute data supporting their effectiveness in, post-traumatic stress scenarios and jump-starting people from those situations, allowing them to be more present in their lives to get, the longer-term therapies that they need, bringing that into benefit plans. And that stuff is being entirely missed by big box solutions, it's difficult to turn a big ship. It's difficult to have an entrepreneurial spirit in a big organization. And the level of innovation was just so impressive to me.
I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about diagnostic tools in the treatment of disease and how to integrate those tools into a health plan. One of the things that we're working on right now is embedding precision testing into the prior authorization process for some very expensive medications. And that is not in the interest of keeping people from those medications. It is in the interest of identifying which medications will work most effectively for them and getting them into their hands as quickly as possible. I'm going to use the Humira example from our friend Lena Nancy, where Humira is effective in 37% of the patients that it is prescribed for. Now, I'm not thrilled with that level of effectiveness to start with. There are some reasons for that. There are 3 pathways that the autoimmune diseases operate on. And if your autoimmune disease is operating on a different pathway, Humira is not going to work for you. It doesn't matter how many times you're prescribed it. And every time you get prescribed that medication, the other drugs are less and less efficacious. So there is real human toll here. And I heard more conversation this time about things like that than I have at any other conference that I've been to.
Yeah, I agree. It was really about, I heard so much conversation, not only from the stage, but also in the hallways about how do we get people the right care in the right place at the right time. It wasn't about how do we pay the least amount for services. Right. It was really about right care, right time, right place. And I think things like what Allison was just speaking to is just imagine how much more effective a workforce is going to be if they get a medication that works for them from the beginning. It's just everybody wins.
Correct. And you don't cut the doctor out of the loop. Yep. You keep the doctor absolutely in the loop, and you keep the physician, whoever the provider is, engaged. And that's what I heard from a number of the solutions that we spoke with, is that they're not looking to cut the provider out. And I think for so long, we've been cutting the provider out. And yes, we all have things to say about providers and systems and imaging centers and lab costs and blah, blah, blah. We can go on and on and on. But those people spend a lot of time learning. There are some very capable, effective people there, and perhaps we should pay a little bit more attention to them. And the outcome of that is more controllable healthcare costs. Because as our friend Deb Alt says, the right care delivered to the right patient at the right time and in the right place is usually the right price and way less expensive than people think.
Yeah. I'd like to end by bringing us back to a common theme that I'm hearing in everything you're saying, and that is collaboration. Rather than, and somebody used the term silos earlier, I think it was Pat, our industry and all of the pieces of it, whether it's us as advisors or an employer or an insurance carrier, another vendor partner, there have been so many silos, whether it's with, even within the organizations. And I see consistently that wherever we have collaboration, that's where we're winning. So Allison, to your point, the clinicians and the scientists, who might be AI scientists, they might be data scientists. They might be data scientists coupled with clinicians working on a project to bring forward using, genomics to make sure that people are getting a medication that's going to actually work for them and especially not potentially harm them. So talk a little bit, I'll put this open, talk a little bit about your perspective on collaboration and how you see that being highlighted from the event for those of us that were there, and how you see that supporting us all going forward.
I can speak to that one first. So one of the things I liked about this event is not only we have vendors, but we have consultants across a wide spectrum of practice specialties. So there's some events that if you happen to work in the smaller group market, or you happen to do a lot of fully insured business because that's what's available, it's very frowned upon. And somehow you're not actually doing enough for the client. One of the things I like here is there's not that level of judgment. But it's important to hear all the pieces. And this is what we were talking about earlier. And this is why it's nice to have perspective and get diverse input from other people that are doing different things, because they might say something that will be very beneficial to my under 50 life groups. And I can say, okay, I can see how I can use that to help them. And they might hear something that I say that would say that they would be, oh, I can see her perspective. I can use that and it might be helpful for my clients. So I think that when we all keep the client at the front instead of our egos, I think we all just do so much better.
Agreed.
Nancy, it's so well said. And, although I didn't attend a conference like all of you, which I will next year, I think the key is, this is no longer about a product driven community. It goes back to what each and every one of you said earlier. It's about putting the right solution on the table that, will mitigate risk and will have better outcomes. And I know I keep talking about the better outcomes because to me, that's where the ROI comes in. Okay, if I have a more productive employee, I have a more productive employee not only in my business, within their family and their community, so their personal lives and everything. And I think we all win from that in so many different ways. But that's the difference between a broker and an advisor, is that a broker will pull things off of the shelf. And it doesn't matter, Nancy, what market you're in. As you mentioned, with unfortunately the small market, the states and other things just kind of limit, certain things for us, which is frustrating to all of us because we know we can actually get better results. And it's the limitations that hold us back with especially the BUCAs out there. But, we have to work with the BUCAs as well, right? And the key is really helping the client understand what can be done. What are some of the solutions out there? If we can look at industry and pretty much know what the top 3 areas of concerns are. And then we can actually focus on those 3 areas because most likely that client, because of the industry they're in, they're going to be affected by that. And that's how we can help, is just bringing different solutions to the table and educating our clients. That's so important, letting them understand and helping them understand what exactly is out there, that's different, that can help them. So I want to.
And to your point, Pat, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Right. So as much as you have the best ideas, and I'm sure we have all experienced this, where we walk away just absolutely shaking and scratching our head that, they're not interested, be it their, lack of innovation or need to, where they put innovation as far as importance, or if they even see it, their risk tolerance, it just depends. I always think of this industry as 3 buckets: those who are leading the change, those who are following the change, and those who don't even see that change is necessary. I mean, there's still that last bucket that's out there. I mean, of course, many of us, all of us on this podcast are in the first bucket, leading the change. But it's not, even though it's so obvious to us, you still run across those clients that they don't see what you're seeing, or, is in the infamous words of my children, they're not picking up what you're putting down, right? So it's frustrating, but you just keep persisting. And to circle into the the second speaker, which was one of my personal favorites, Charles Duhigg. He had some really good lessons for us on communication. Because that's really, at the end of the day, we're connecting these dots, right? We're collaborating. It really comes down to making sure that we are having that right level of conversation that resonates with all of the great ideas that we have, so that our clients will pick up what we're putting down, to paraphrase my children, of course. But Charles Duhigg had, his talk was really, really interesting. He, before he started talking, he said that we're going to do an experiment at the end. And we had to turn to a total stranger and tell them the last time we cried. That was the question, right? When was the last time we cried in front of someone, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah. And then he went on to talk about the 3 different types of conversation: the practical, what's this really about? The emotional, how do we feel? And the social conversation of, who are we? And to the extent that, we can ask a deep question, it invites others to tell us what they want from the conversation. So I think that Charles Duhigg's keynote really left us with a lot of nuggets for our industry and how to reach our clients with the right questions that opens up the right conversation that leads to them maybe not in that interaction, but ultimately and eventually leaving those lines of communication open so that eventually they can see what we're seeing. Because we've all had that situation, I would suspect, where we've got the greatest strategy and the client says, or the prospect says, no, thank you. You're just like, what? So it was a really, it was a very interesting, I'm only one chapter into his 3rd book, Super Communicators. But basically he talks about how super communicators have this way of instinctively, he called it in training, right? Is that what he called it? And what was the word that he used? Does anyone know? Well, it's basically where you sync up with someone. The level of conversation is in sync, that your breathing mirrors each other, your heart rate mirrors each other, your brain waves mirror each other. And you're obviously at that level, you're having the, whatever you're talking about, whatever you're saying is being understood, and vice versa. And it leads to the ultimate level of communication.
You're
So I think
vibing.
that's interesting. It gives us a lot to, I'm sure, once I finish the book, I'm sure I'll have a better idea of how to not only start those conversations, but conduct and ultimately leave a thread, leave an opportunity to be open.
Yes.
To continue the conversation.
Which I think brings us back to collaboration. Staying curious, being collaborative, all of which were on display at the event. Just a really wonderful event overall, I thought. Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you always.
My pleasure.
And we look forward to
Thanks,
talking
Nancy.
to everyone again next month.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you next time.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Bye.
Nancy, thanks
Bye-bye.
again. Good to
Bye
see
bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye, Rockstar.